Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Agribusiness, Food, and Beverage Group webinar on navigating the downturn, strategies for Canadian Agtech and Foodtech companies. My name is Ali Barmel, and I am a partner in Fasken's Vancouver office, where I lead our British Columbia agribusiness team. And I also co-lead our firm's National Agribusiness, Food, and Beverage Group. It's a very interesting time in the markets and the industry for agribusiness generally, and specifically so for Agtech and Foodtech companies. The world needs innovation in agtech and foodtech, and the area is an exciting one. But the current environment presents some unique challenges and opportunities, which we hope to explore today with our panel. I will now turn things over to Anne-Marie, a partner in Fasken's Quebec City office and my fellow co-lead of our Agribusiness, Food, and Beverage Group.
Thank you, Ali. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being there. As mentioned, I am co-leader of Fasken's Agribusiness, Food, and Beverage Group. We have a firm-wide team of lawyers and agents actively involved in the industry. Our knowledge, experience, and expertise unique to agribusiness, food, and beverage law allow us to develop multidisciplinary solutions that protect clients' interests at every step of the supply chain, from production to processing, distribution, agtech, and agri-finance. I would like to introduce Simar and Anand from our Toronto office, who will be moderating today's session. Simar has been with the firm since 2016 and maintains a broad corporate commercial practice. He advises on the formation, governance, structure, and financing issues for early stage companies with a focus on emerging technologies and innovation, particularly in the agtech and foodtech space. Simar, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much, and the audience particularly, for joining us today. We're in the presence of some very esteemed guests and folks that work across the country in the space, doing some very pioneering work. And so we're excited to be having these conversations with them today. Appreciate the introduction, Anne-Marie, but at this time, I think I'd love to learn more about our panelists. So I will turn it over to them. Maybe you can give a brief introduction of yourselves. I know we've included brief bios of each of you in the webinar package that we've circulated to the audience. So perhaps what we can do is maybe name where we find you in the world today and something about yourself that we wouldn't otherwise know from reading your bio that we've shared. Catherine, I'll kick it over to you first.
Thanks so much, and I'm really excited to be joining the panel today. I'm Catherine Metrycki. I'm the founder and CEO at Callia Flowers, known for delivering flowers across Canada. And I am based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, so smack dab in the middle between a bunch of you. It's finally spring here. And something that you may not know is that I'm a new mom. So I'm balancing early maternity leave and being founder and CEO at the same time. I'm really looking forward to the panel today.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll go over to Kirk next, just because he's next on my screen here.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kirk Moir. I am the CEO of Crush Dynamics. We're based in Summerland, British Columbia, but I'm based in Lower Mainland in New Westminster this morning. Something about me is I'm really enjoying being part of the wine industry. It's a whole new blank canvas for me to explore. So I get to enjoy Summerland, the Okanagan, and the rest of the world when it comes to winemaking. So it's a really great side benefit of this position.
That's awesome. Craig, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Simar. Happy to be here and be part of the discussion. As Ali mentioned, I think it's a very exciting time to be in the agri-tech, food tech segment as the new tech is being introduced and practices are being introduced, and the segment overall is rightly gaining more attention. I'm currently the director of the AgriNext program at Foresight. As a quick background to Foresight, we're a clean tech innovation network and accelerator. We work across Canada. We have the goal to enable Canada to be the first G7 country to net zero. So as such, we're looking at all areas of clean tech, not just agri-tech and food tech. that comes in because we have these industry-specific programs and activities, one of which is focused on the agri-food sector. So that's where I come in. My background is all in technology. I've been in a variety of industries over 30 years plus, and the last 7 years has been focused on ag tech. So thing you wouldn't know about me, I guess, well, you would quickly learn about me if you spoke to me, as I'm a massive soccer fan and crazy about that, and coach 3 or 4 evenings a week as well. So heavily into that. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the convo.
Thank you very much, Craig. Last but not least, Chris.
Thanks very much. Chris Conway with Food and Beverage Ontario. I'm the CEO there, and we represent food and beverage processors in the province of Ontario. There are 4,000 companies in Ontario that are involved in food and beverage processing. 90% of them are small businesses. And we're the largest employer by employment in the province in the manufacturing sector. So very big industry. My background, I've worked in association management and government relations for many years, association management for 20 years. And then prior to that, I worked in Ottawa and Parliament Hill. So I've been doing government relations for a very long time. And something you may not know about me is I'm a skier. So a downhill skier. I enjoy doing that in the wintertime. So.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. I'll quickly jump in. I didn't get to share a quick fun fact about myself that you wouldn't find in my bio. So in addition to practicing the business law group at Fasken, I also moonlight as a chef. I'm the executive chef of a restaurant in Montreal. And so part of the reason why I'm so actively involved and love and have a deep interest in Agtech and Foodtech is because food runs through my blood. If I'm not in a boardroom or in my office, I like to spend most of my time in the kitchen. So with that, a few housekeeping rules that I thought we'd get out of the way before we dive into the discussion. My goal here will be to keep the conversation flowing so we can cover as much ground as possible during the next 45 to 50 minutes that we have. However, the part that I would like to emphasize here for everyone is that this is a conversation. So panelists, what that means for you is, while I may venture into dark corners of my law school memories and use the Socratic method to call on some of you and get your reaction or ask you to share your thoughts on specific topics that we're discussing, if other panelists would like to join or contribute to the conversation, please do not hesitate to jump in. For the audience, you should also know that we love questions. So if there's anything you'd like to ask the panelists, if you'd like to ask me, if you'd like to contribute in any way to the conversation that we're having, we've got a chat box going that's being monitored by myself and my colleagues. We've also received a couple of questions beforehand that I might layer in where I think appropriate during the conversation, but please don't hesitate to ask questions as we move along. So with that, we'll jump into the very first topic of the afternoon here. We are seeing more and more conversations happen around the dinner table, out on the streets, in newsrooms, and even in boardrooms around topics like climate change, food security, rapidly growing populations around the world, and overall a general demand for healthier, cleaner, and chemical-free foods. And so I thought it would be helpful for us to start with a bigger picture, sort of macro level view of current market conditions and specifically consumer appetite. So if it's okay, Catherine, I'd like to turn it over to you and get your reaction, seeing as I think amongst all of us here, you're probably the most consumer facing on the panel. And so do you think there is sufficient demand, or in some cases, public pressure to invest in this space and help companies in ag tech and food tech weather this economic storm?
It's a great question, and it's one that we've been talking a lot internally at Callia. So we manufacture bouquets all the way through to delivery to consumers. And so we're direct to consumer, but really fully end to end. And one of the things that has been a consistent trend over the last number of years, but really intensified over the last, I'd say 6 to 12, has been exactly what you're talking about, pressure from consumers for companies to do better in a whole bunch of different ways. And so we have a number of consumers who are asking for us to publish, records about sustainability and who are looking for local and pesticide free and all of those types of things, all the way from, as I said, how the flowers are grown, how they're treated, and then even to their door, like what's the carbon footprint associated with my delivery and all those kinds of things. But one of the crux and challenges that we see is that there's a significant gap between what consumers tell you they want and what consumers are willing to pay for. And that has consistently been a challenge for us. And I think it's going to continue to intensify as we go into a recessionary environment. We test things like selling fair trade bouquets instead of regular bouquets. But fair trade bouquets, if they have that certification, often come with a 30, 40, 50% higher price point, and consumers don't buy them. Same thing's true if you throw an opt-in for would you like to offset your carbon footprint as part of your delivery for this bouquet. Very few consumers choose to. And so I think there's going to be this awkward crunch where consumers are going to say that they want this. Companies are going to be able to offer it, but there's going to be a price gap. And I think we're going to see that intensify when companies are struggling. In the venture community, cash is tight right now. And so being really efficient is important. Consumer wallets are also really tight. And so it's going to be a really interesting rub as we play out the next year or two in terms of who's going to win. Is it the desire to do better from the consumer? Is the company who's going to take the burden? I'm not sure where it's going to land, and I'm curious to see where others are seeing that friction.
Certainly, and I'll open it up to everyone on the panel. Kirk, someone like you who's working more in the B2B space, supplying other businesses that are using your ingredient as an input. Are you feeling that pressure in your world as well?
Absolutely. Catherine's comments definitely ring true in my world. We do have a B2B business model. We do work with companies who put a tremendous amount of attention on ESGs. Basically, the larger the food company, the higher the probability that they're going to have very clear ESG goals that they're putting a ton of accounting attention on. So that's really good for us coming from an upcycling perspective with a significant focus on clean label. But I really wanted to drill in on what Catherine said. This whole, are you willing to pay for it is a really, really important dynamic. And I think we all have, particularly those of us in sort of the ingredient B2B world, we need to make a business case work, right? So, everybody's looking for ingredients that are going to help them essentially deliver better products, right? Ones that have, higher consumer preference, better price point, ultimately better margins. So, if we're going to make this work, we have to take the burden away and some of that difficult choice that Catherine's talking about. So, we're in a fantastic position that, we're able to deliver, really, really significant performance, but as a clean label ingredient. So, it's an example of, the world of something that Craig indicated, innovation in the food and agri-tech business, essentially coming up with sort of a comprehensive business model answer to some of these, very, very challenging questions.
And
if I could,
yeah, please go ahead, Catherine.
If I could interject, when Kirk talks a little bit about shifting expectations from consumers and who's going to bear the burden, I just remembered, I was driving yesterday through the streets of Winnipeg and saw for the first time the B Corp certification. So maybe if anybody's unfamiliar, you can get certified to be a B Corp, which is demonstrating ESG and sustainability in a number of different aspects of your business. I saw it for the first time published on a billboard associated with a clothing company. It was the first time that I just seen that logo. So it tells me that there's getting traction now from consumers, that they're starting to recognize that almost as a stamp or a symbol of a business's commitment. But I'm curious how long it's going to take.
I would just add a comment. It's interesting on the back end, there's stuff that people may not see that's happening in the industry as well. And some of it's, frankly, been brought in by government. So provincially in Ontario, we have the Blue Box program, which has undergone dramatic changes in the last year or two. And and somebody said to me on a call once, we have it's an extremely complex system, perhaps one of the most complex systems in the world now. But the result of that is it's forcing people to change behavior, right? And producers are accepting responsibility, producer responsibility organizations. Beyond that, the Canadian Agricultural Partnership that was just negotiated is now known as SCAP. It's a Sustainability Canadian Agricultural Partnership. There's a massive sustainability component in it from the federal government, and that affects a lot of the programs we deal with, so that there is this sustainability piece that's going to be in there going forward. It's not something that's on the front end, so a lot of people wouldn't be aware of it, but it is there, and that's a back end kind of thing that's happening for the industry as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, we're talking about this price cap, and there's what consumers want and what they can really afford in the market. And so my question to all of you is, how are you really dealing with that? In talking to some of our clients, what we hear is, well, this can be a simple marketing play. It's marketing in a way and convincing the consumer that that extra premium that they're paying is for their benefit in the long run. So it's pure marketing. Others might say, well, no, it's finding ways to source these ingredients, whether they be organic, fair trade, et cetera, from an operational perspective in a more efficient manner. So in your minds, where is the magic? Where is the solution here?
We've tried to pass some choice down to consumers, and I think that's part of it. I think it's what you're talking about in terms of demonstrating that there is an option and consumers can choose to do it or not. And maybe we start to see some of the adoption there. I'll be honest, we haven't cracked it. A lot of what we do in terms of commitments to carbon offsets or better product or better sourcing ends up being more because it's the values of Callia, in that we're choosing to do this, and our staff and our teams and our overall company ethos is around making those choices. Sometimes it gets picked up by consumers in a marketing lens, but just as often they'll choose the thing that costs less. And I think that's going to continue to incentivize. So we haven't cracked it. Right now we do it because it's values. We try and talk about it in marketing, but it's not something that we've overall succeeded in. I'd be curious what others are seeing.
Yeah, I'm not on the direct-to-consumer kind of path, but I was speaking with a major food distributor last week or a few weeks ago, and he's already seen that movement away from kind of the organic aisle to the conventional aisle, and then from conventional to frozen. So he's seeing it. What I think businesses have to look at is how can they be price competitive in this environment, right? And so an example of that is Up Vertical Farms. You might have seen them in the news recently. They basically planned out their whole kind of development of their system, their automation that they put in play to grow baby leaf greens in an indoor environment, and they can effectively do that now at scale to supply all of BC and be price competitive with what's coming in from California currently. So that's the kind of models I think people have to look at going forward.
I completely agree with Craig. The world's changing, right? Price of transportation is going to continue to be a concern. So kind of local is critical. So in our business, we're thinking about kind of the global optimization problem of where's the source material, where are we going to put processing, where's the customer, and how do we continue to sort of optimize that. But to Craig's point as well, that the price is a really significant driver for consumers. So you've got to come up with a really compelling reason for them personally. Sustainability, is probably something that government's going to have to continue to sort of generate around carbon taxes and those kinds of things. But my household makes decisions based on what's good for my family in terms of price, and as Catherine indicated before, better for you. So we need to be part of those trends. In our world, though, we've seen some of our customers that have really sort of focused on plant-based, better for you, that have been very, very much impacted by changing conditions over the last year. So we've had to be thoughtful in our approach and diversify and target customers that are a little more sort of in inflation tolerant, if you will, in order to be a viable business going forward.
That's great. This is actually a great segue into the topic that we want to cover next, which was innovation. And Craig, you mentioned vertical farming. Do we think there is potential in these sort of market conditions for new businesses and new technologies to emerge? And vertical farming is a great example. Precision agriculture is a great example. these technologies, they have the ability to increase efficiency and reduce costs, and thereby they're more prevalent or conducive in an environment where consumer spending is down. And so, Kirk, I'd like to ask you, your company is a prime example of disruptive technology that couldn't have come at a better time, that allows healthier, cleaner food to be made at a reduced cost because of the ingredient that you're supplying. And Craig, you've had the privilege of seeing very interesting projects cross your desk, either as an investor or a mentor. And so love to hear some examples, if you've got any, of projects that you've seen that are conducive and will emerge and quite successfully emerge in an environment like this where consumer spending is down.
Well, I can go first. So, I'm a tech industry refugee. My thought was, tech is where all the innovation happens, and the rest of the world is, far, far behind. My impression now that I've been in the food industry for a few years is it is, an extremely intense environment in terms of innovation. People are looking to do, better all the time, and that shows up in so many areas, including, vertical farming and better fertilizers, and the opportunity for innovation is tremendous, and people are doing it. It's actually really been happening in agri-tech, hard for a long time with digital technologies, et cetera. As you say, Simar, we're a great example, right? It's not like we're the first team in history to say, we should really do something with this material from winemaking. But it's really an example of some really interesting collisions in the industry. In fact, I describe my science team as kind of the ultimate industry insider and the ultimate industry outsider coming together and then sort of sparking away to the point where we've got potentially an extremely disruptive technology with global implications. And then we started to bring in the best that we can find in the world. My new head of fermentation is from Brazil, and we're happy to have her on the team. But I think that's an example of the world moving very, very quickly in agri-tech and food tech to bring innovations that have been proven to market.
I could just add a comment on that. In our space as well, it's interesting. The current situation has resulted in a labor shortage for a lot of our members, and the other side of that is the innovation opportunity. So when you don't have enough people, then you have the potential to innovate, automate. So I would say that there's a stronger case for that, and people are looking at that more closely because, as I've had said to me, by the time a role is automated, it's probably been vacant for some time. They haven't been able to get someone. So that's actually tied in directly. So that's a direct consequence of some of the stuff that's happened lately with labor. And we see a tie there with the innovation piece, provided the regulatory situation can be reasonably efficient to get that equipment brought in.
Yeah, good point. Oh, sorry, Catherine. I'll just throw in a couple of examples that you were asking around there, Simar. You're right. I do see a lot of. I'm in a fortunate position that I do see a lot of different early stage tech companies coming into the space. And on the area of indoor growing, one of the companies I'd mentioned there is InHub Farms. They're in the interior BC here. They are looking. They have a fully automated indoor growing capability for high-end mushrooms. They do this on sustainably harvested logs. It's 100% traceable. It's grown and delivered locally to save on transportation and environmental impacts. So there's one additional example where you're going for this more local modular kind of style that is going to be replicated in multiple cities across Canada, across North America potentially. So that's one of those examples. I think given the size of the food waste opportunity or problem, it's a $50 billion a year in Canada problem. It's about 11 million metric tons are estimated to be edible at the time of disposal. Pardon me. So there's a lot of work being done around circular economies. One of the companies there I call out is Refeed Farms. They have a three-stage process of upcycling food waste, first for people, then for livestock, then finally for soil. So these nutrients would otherwise be lost. So they're repurposing those nutrients and keeping the waste out of landfill and reducing emissions in the process. So that's good. And then I see around digital technologies, the increased use of data. A company like Paquetta Systems, they're out of New Brunswick. They do real-time nutrient analysis of plants through tissue sampling. So this is taking something that would previously take days or weeks to get results for farmers. They can now do in a matter of seconds. So that's how the technology is transforming some of that on-farm activity as well there. So there's a few examples, but there's lots more coming. It will take time to get these benefits to filter through to the impact on the grocery prices, et cetera, but it is coming.
And I think I'd build on that by saying I think this is going to be some innovator die. I think particularly in Agtech, Foodtech, where I think a lot of processes have been traditional for a long time and there hasn't been a lot of pressure to innovate. You know, we see in floral, this is an old industry, a lot of mom and pop florists. More than a third of florists in Canada aren't profitable, which is really interesting. There's a lot of florists that have been in business for, many generations and just haven't been, I don't want to say forced, but haven't had the incentive to really need to digitize and create efficiency. One of the stats that I find the craziest is that 20% of flowers in the industry get thrown out because they die. Perishability is a huge issue. So you have 20% wastage that's traditionally been passed on to the consumer. But now we're seeing cost of inputs go up consistently. So 40% higher in some of our stems just over the last 12 months. And so you can't see a 40% increase in inputs, pressure needing to go on consumers. Also, a recessionary environment where consumers are watching their dollars and not be starting to look at efficiencies and the need for efficiencies, like things like wastage or dump or efficiency in delivery or whatever else. And so I think it's going to create some demand for more efficient ways of managing what some of the traditionally held, this is just part of doing business in this category. I think we're going to be forced to look at eliminating some of those so that we don't suddenly find ourselves upside down as an industry. We're starting to see it in floral, and I think it's going to expand across anything to do with perishable food, direct to consumer, all at the same time.
Catherine, that's an interesting point you bring up about adoption and buy-in, right? Where are we getting resistance from and pushback from? Isn't the current business model that's being used in your respective industries, right? And is it just like we've been doing this the way we've been doing it for the last 30 years and it's been working well for us and nothing needs to change? And so that's what's that's what's resulting in sort of this almost like a feedback loop where consumers want it, can't afford it. There are companies that are developing these technologies, but there's no one to buy it, right? And so there's like this vicious cycle. And Kirk, I'm curious in your industry, are you seeing that as well, where you have this ingredient and there's pushback on use of it in some shape or form, or?
Yeah, absolutely. What I hear you say, Simar, is there is a bit of a vicious cycle. Everybody's going to drop to their bottom line quickly, but as Catherine said, it's really about the organization that can deliver what the customer needs at the best price point. So, this whole point about, 20%, inefficiency in flowers that people just accepted. Well, I think those kinds of things are coming to an end, right? So, if I can deliver, something because of, and I tend to see it in this way. If my efficiency by being an upcycler means I can deliver, my ingredients at an 85, 95%, price reduction compared to everybody else in the industry because I'm being more efficient and I'm using cheaper input materials, then I'm going to get the business, right? So, I think you really need to be thoughtful about, how to get the customer they want. So in my case, it's, my food customer looking for, lower sodium, lower sugar kinds of solutions. And again, the world is always sort of changing, right? We live in a very fast information-driven world where, things like erythritol are making the biggest chocolate companies in the world go, we need to be rethinking our better for you chocolate strategy, right? I would have expected that to be, a sort of a 5-10 year cycle before, and now it's much, much faster, right? So these kinds of, opportunities for efficiency are going to be where the innovators of the world go because, it becomes much obvious, much faster.
I was just going to add, it's interesting. We've talked a few times about what is innovation. And, sometimes you can have processes or minor improvements you make that are, in fact, an innovative way to approach something, but it's not a massive technological change. We had an example in a facility where they brought in robotic palletization, and it was a huge improvement for their labor recruitment and retention because people didn't have to lift things around anymore. That's relatively straightforward. But there are other examples we've had like that where somebody makes a change to a process and and we say, we have programs where we do innovation type work. And we say, okay, well, let's talk about what's actually innovative, because reworking a process in some case can also be innovative, not in the traditional sense of the way we think about it in terms of technology and so on, but there are other innovative opportunities out there as well.
And I'll build on that, Chris. I think that's such a great point. I think we typically think about innovation as being, this shiny new product that consumers can buy in a different way. But that's one of the things that we've had to change our thinking on internally at Callia as well. And so if I pivot back to my conversation about perishability and more specifically about wastage and dump, because Callia does things differently with our SKU assortment, we've traditionally been 5 to 8% wastage and dump. But we're just embarking on a new project with the federal government's IRAP program. Shout out to government, which I think we're going to be talking about next. That's funding us building a new forecasting tool. And so it's entirely around internal efficiency to get our number from 5-6% down to 1% or less. That's cool innovation. It doesn't make a fancy Instagram post, or it's not cool for consumers to think about. But if we can drive 4 to 6% less waste, that means 4 to 6% we can reduce our prices, which creates, again, some of that demand or starts to offset some of the pressure on consumers. And so I really like that point around thinking about innovation, not only around consumer facing and front end, but also how this demand for efficiency on the back end can be innovation as a result as well.
That's really interesting, and shameless plug here, Catherine. We at the firm have facilitated sort of navigating the IRAP process for a number of our clients, and it's actually a great segue into the next conversation. Chris, I actually wanted to turn over to you for this part. Someone who has 20 years of advocacy and government relations work under their belt. Where do you think the gaps are? Are there any gaps in government support? What are the pain points that stakeholders are having navigating these gaps, or whatever initiatives that are put forward? You mentioned Blue Box. There's Go Ontario, another one. We had also spoken earlier about the CAHRC program. What are some of the pain points that stakeholders have navigating these programs?
Sure. Thank you, Simar. And, really, we're getting great support from the government in many areas. We have a program we run at FBO called Careers Now. It's open to the whole industry, and it's a very large recruitment. It's got many aspects to it of recruitment and so on. And, we like to think we're doing the right things. And then the same thing with the Kirk initiative nationally. There's some great work going on there and setting out a national strategy for the whole agri-food sector. So, they're great programs. And then provincially, we've got the Grow Ontario strategy, which is specifically focused on supply chain, automation, innovation, and labor recruitment and retention. So again, all the right things. Where we're finding a challenge, and I think this resonates across the sector, is awareness. And it touches on a lot of things. It's about investment, it's about job opportunities, it's other things. Awareness of the industry and awareness of the opportunity. And I think that's where we're having a shortfall, is that we're doing the right things. In our case, running some of these programs, it's really hard getting the public's attention and getting them to think about the industry. And I think we're victims of our own success this way. People go into a restaurant, or they go into a supermarket and the food's there, or they go into a flower shop and the flowers are there. And so people aren't thinking as much about the process behind that. But there are great opportunities in the industry. And, so government is supporting us on that. But I'd say where are the gaps? It really is awareness. So we're starting to get to a point now. I think we're getting some support for marketing on that. It's going to be a lot to do. And when people do get exposed to the industry, they like it. We had a video series we did a couple of years ago with some students from, I think it was Western, and, filmed it afterwards. And they said, this is great. What a fantastic industry. It's really a viable career choice. But it's getting people to the point where they've had that experience, they've had that exposure. And once they do, and I know everybody here has had that exposure and has already drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak, but it's getting people exposed to the industry, I think, is a huge part of this. And government is helping, but, certainly continuing that support is crucial. The support we've had in the past has been very sporadic. You get a program for 6 months, you get something for a year, but really it has to be sustained over a long period of time. And that's really what the work is that's happening at the national level, is for a sustained national approach to this.
I'll go on
Go
top
ahead.
of that, if I may there. I agree with the comments that Chris has made there. I think from a technology point of view, federally and provincially, we have lots of R&D related programs, funding, incentives, support mechanisms for the development side of the technology, which is great, and that's starting to bear fruit, which is pardon the pun. However, more support for me is needed for the farmers to actually try this technology, test it, adopt it, right? They're already in a highly risky business. They're impacted by, weather, climate change, pest pressures, regulatory pressure, fuel prices, etc., fertilizer prices. So, and now, expecting them to take on all the risk of adopting the technology, I think is adding just too much risk into that mix. So I'd like to see more support, education, training, financial support for farmers to transition, to a more regenerative approach with the support of these technologies that are coming through.
Thanks, Frank. I'd go on top of that. So first and foremost, I wanted to, really give Foresight tons of credit for, putting energy into this. So it's really, part of a constellation of services that, Canadian government, both federally and provincially, are sort of bringing to bear. So, Foresight has been, an exceptionally important part of our growth trajectory. But Simar, I wanted to really underscore what you said about navigating. There's lots to be navigated here. So, you said navigating IRAP, but that, IRAP is really, only the tip of the iceberg, right? So there's lots of, in our world, there's lots of agriculture and agri-food Canada programs like the Agricultural Clean Tech Program, or ACT. There's the Food Waste Reduction Challenge, which all requires navigation. We're happy to have received SDTC's seed money, and we're now part of a potential sort of startup program with them. But it takes a lot of thought and navigation and energy to do that. But I think government's sort of realizing that there's a lot of need for navigation. So things like IRAP and Innovation Canada's accelerated growth services model, I think, is really interesting. And there's some even higher scale programs that Government of Canada is working on. But having been to Australia in the last 6 months, I'm also surprised at how aggressive other jurisdictions are in terms of government support. So it's really a question of sort of making it easy to navigate. So a good example of that is what the superclusters are doing with Protein Industries Canada. Another sort of element that to be navigated, but once you've got kind of that dialed in, there's a lot of support out there for new innovations, per our previous conversation.
I also would say something about the opportunity, and I think that's something we've got to emphasize to government. I was at an event recently where a map of the Netherlands was superimposed over Ontario, and someone was talking about their output. And, you really start to realize what we could be. Canada is a country, obviously, that has tremendous potential beyond even what we're doing now for this whole space. And, getting government to really recognize, and like in the case of other areas, they Ottawa and Ontario is getting a lot of, it's a great industry. They're giving a lot of support to it, and that's wonderful. But, also on our end, we have that potential as well. And we have the potential to really crank things up. And I think that's a message, if we can get through, that could be helpful in recognizing where this could go.
So one of the questions that we received in the chat box here is, it sounds like there's a lot of financial support and public money available, but what about all the other things for early stage companies? The mentorship, the training, the networking, and opening up networks to them. I think this comes back to your point, Chris, about awareness, generating that awareness and the education. But there are other supports available other than just money. if you don't mind, I'd like you to take a few minutes, just because I know the FBO is working very closely with the government on these two programs, Go Ontario and the CHRC. If you can just give us a brief idea of how they work and how folks can go in and as Kirk said, navigate the program or get involved and apply.
Sure. I mean, one of the challenges with these programs is that there's complexity, right? So when the government does come out with funding programs, sometimes there's a tight timeline. There is complexity. Smaller organizations inherently, we do a lot of work to try and help our smaller members understand some of these programs. They may not be able to dedicate somebody full time to look at this stuff. It's so that is definitely one of the challenges that's out there. But beyond the money, I'd say, I mean, there is stuff out there. The program we're running right now, Careers Now, I mean, some of the areas we work in, for example, job ready skills training, mentorship, talent attraction, virtual job fairs, coaching. We've got a partnership with First Nations. We've got hundreds of people doing training in our very first agreement we did in Northern Ontario with First Nations and also with the Ontario Discoverabilities Network. So we've got hundreds of companies involved with this, 400 companies involved. So that's something where that's not a money thing, but that's open. People can just apply. They can get it. We had a language training pilot running at one point for new Canadians, so that they could better integrate in the workforce, and get those opportunities once they're in a facility and working. That the language issue doesn't become a barrier. So there are many facets to this we're trying right now. That are available that are not financial. And there are a lot of good programs out there like that. And we really are trying to stay away from sort of more studies on this. We really are trying to do, rubber hits the road sort of work, where we're implementing things and we're trying to really understand some of these issues that come into play. But I definitely say, that is a challenge with some of these programs is they can be tough to access.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll jump in again and just reemphasize that I think, the innovation ecosystem is getting smarter. They're learning how to do this, more efficiently. I mentioned Foresight, so our access to expertise through that has been tremendous. The EIRs that we've worked with, the executives and residents have been, really, really extremely good. Foresight is very much a sort of big tent organization, and we also work with much more targeted organizations like BioEnterprise. We're really focused on biotechnology in agri and food tech. Given we're so focused on fermentation, it just makes sense for us to find expertise there. And, I'm extremely happy to say that, someone that used to be part of Maple Leaf's R&D team is now our executive in residence. So really leveraging the expertise that's out there to sort of, do the navigation and avoid the easily avoided speed bumps. You're always going to have your unique fun speed bumps, but, avoiding the obvious ones is something that I think is going to make our innovation ecosystem much, much more effective.
Yeah, thanks. You mean Catherine? Thanks again for the plug for Foresight there, Kirk. As I mentioned before, we're working across all areas of clean tech, right? Not just agri-food, but and this year over 300 companies that we're working with. You mentioned the EIRs there. We have over 250 now who are helping bring our programs forward. And these programs are specifically designed to help the company, depending on which area they're, which stage of their growth they're at, and help them to grow. So trying to help them to accelerate through that whole process, right? And so on top of that, we also have innovation challenges that we run. So we've run over 50 of these now, where we're looking to bring in real world industry challenges and do a call for solutions. So and then people can put their proposal in, and if successful, then it goes on. It leads to kind of pilot projects over multiple years where they can test out their technology and gain some funding or support for that as well. So there are mechanisms there. Anybody who wants to pass along references to Foresight, I'm happy to take those. So go ahead, Kath.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. One of the things that I feel is important to call out coming from the prairies is that I am fearful and often concerned about the innovation that is coming out of the prairies versus often what's coming out of the bigger centers that have more support and more visibility and more access to, mentorship and growth and even precedent when it comes to building really fast technology, particularly with a bit of a venture lens. Manitoba and Saskatchewan had the lowest rates of venture investment across the country last year. We had less than the Maritimes did. Yet when we talk about ag tech and food tech, this should be the breadbasket of innovation. And so this is a bit of a call out for, any of those who are watching, whether it's government or whether it's venture or whether it's, support and mentorship ecosystems. I think it's important to recognize that we need to diversify that investment and that focus and even those centers outside of what traditionally has been the West Coast and the Ontario bubble. Because there's a lot of potential in the prairies, but it can only happen if we continue to build the ecosystems here. And that means creating more supports from government and also challenging our venture community and our innovation community to start looking here instead of just taking the flight across the long, wide expanse. So my plug for the prairies here. And I'm curious what Kirk feels coming out of Kelowna, whether you feel like the innovation ecosystem there is starting to come, or whether that's something that you feel like has opportunity as well.
Good point. There's no doubt that Toronto is the center of the universe. Winnipeg, having gone to school there, is definitely feels that. But things are changing, and so one of the things that you said, Catherine, that really resonates with me is we've all just lived through 3 years of COVID, and it's changed the way we work, right? So our ability to interact with people, like I would never have been able to have the relationship that I have with Colin at Bio Enterprise, or anybody like that, if we weren't all now willing to get on a Zoom call and have a really effective conversation. And I think places like the prairies are going to benefit from that. Kelowna definitely is. I drive around Kelowna and go, have we achieved sort of ecosystem critical mass? And I see that, and there's no doubt that there's a great opportunity in Manitoba and Saskatchewan around agritech. I also see that coming, right? There's Ameritech and those kinds of organizations that are saying, why aren't we doing this here? And we're going to do it. So, I kind of think we're at the early edge of a very, interesting curve, that really answers your challenge, Catherine.
This has been a super insightful and very timely conversation. I have to say, I'm loving the cross collaboration that I'm seeing across some of our panelists here. That's awesome. I want to give our audience a chance to get involved in the conversation as well, and ask any questions that they have of our panelists. While we give them a few minutes to add any questions that they had in our chat box, I was hoping to do one last spin of the panelists and any lasting thoughts, any last comments that you'd like to share with the audience.
I could share a quick comment.
Sorry, Chris, we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I could share a quick comment about government, and really, it's just, for me, it's think of us. And that's something I say in the broader context of all the big priorities that are going on out there, all the things that may seem higher profile, although food's been very high profile, particularly in the last few months in the news. But I'd say just think about us as an industry. And, I think that's important to keep that profile up there for us so that we continue to receive the support that we need for the sector.
I would emphasize agility, right? The downturn is going to be very uneven, but it's also going to create, significant opportunities. So, be it transportation costs or efficiencies and waste, those are things that are going to drive, economic opportunity. So sort of keep your eye out and look for the opportunity that the downturn is creating.
I'd agree with that. And I think I would build on that by saying that I'm really excited about this industry and really bullish on the growth. As Callia had gone through the last couple of years of being venture backed and, competing against tech companies, traditional tech companies that were looking for funding and support and the rest of it, we often weren't shiny enough, right? Like, you sell flowers, like you have physical cost of goods, like you have to manufacture this thing. Like, man, this feels so much heavier than, the traditional build a software product and scale it at a variable cost of zero. And now I'm seeing that pendulum start to shift back, where the appetite is for less, smoke and things that could be huge or could disappear, but is actually more interested in what are these real businesses that have real products and real demand, physical things that we need, whether it's food or flowers or other types of ag tech goods. and where's the opportunity for those businesses to be better. It's the better mousetrap kind of story. And so I'm really excited about this category and proud to be affiliated with it, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, like Kirk says, to drive efficiency and innovation in something that has really solid roots and legs. Sorry for the pun.
Good one. I'm going to, at a high level, for me, it's all about priorities. And like most things in business or even in life in general, the things you prioritize, pay attention to, focus on, etc., are the things that tend to get done. And given the health connection between soil and plants and animals and humans and the overall health of the environment, I might be biased, but other than kind of climate change in general and war, I don't see a higher priority than agriculture right now. So I'd like to see it more front and center in the conversation at all levels of government, local government as well, municipal government, not just federal and provincial. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Thank you very much. We've got a few questions that have come in here. I'm going to pick two of them, just in the interest of time. We have a question here from one of our attendees. Which investments, and this is open to all the panelists, which investments should be favored in the current inflationary environment? If there's specific areas of investment within the agricultural, agribusiness space that you think would be, from a profitability, lucrative perspective, in an inflationary environment?
I would suggest a relatively easy target would be the food waste side of things, if we could address some of that. I mean, it is a big area. Kirk can speak to the upcycling side of things. I think that takes a little bit more time, but in terms of some of the technologies in play there. But for me, food waste would be one of the short-term investment areas that I'd look at.
I'll jump on that. Absolutely. I'm involved in this organization because we're here to right a wrong, right? Why on earth are we throwing out, such, amazing superfood? And when you do the math, this is something that's 2.5 times the worldwide tomato crop that we're working on creating here. So, that's going to have, an implication globally in terms of, the food available, right? We're making a dent in that. But, the other area that really jumped to mind, Simar, based on what you just said, is this whole opportunity for innovation, right? So, Craig's mentioned a couple of, innovative vertical farming opportunities. Shout out for, organizations in the, automated harvesting space, and that's really going to continue to be really, really significant. So I see that as really the next opportunity for us to lower the price of food by being thoughtful about automation.
I agree with that. I think certainly efficiency and waste and all of those pieces, as opposed to more shiny. I'm all in on making the way that we do things currently better and less wasteful and more efficient. But you asked industry, Simar, and so I think if we had to pick two, I'd say flowers, obviously, and probably outputs from wine as the other. So if we're looking for people writing checks, those would be my two calls.
You missed chocolate in there, Catherine.
Yeah. The next question we've got here is actually quite related. It says, how do you create an environment of increased productivity through robotization of manufacturing processes when interest rates are currently so high?
Well, certainly government has a role there. But, what jumps to mind immediately for me is sort of super cluster type opportunities where we're working as a team, associated with significant innovations to make things happen in the face of organizations like that. So PIC is trying to make plant-based agriculture and food, $25 billion opportunity in Canada. Are currently kind of running 10 to 12, so they're going to double that. So that's going to happen. And there's opportunities there. That said, there's some really interesting challenges around. There's lots of money for R&D and those kinds of things, but there's I think an opportunity for government to help with kind of capital costs. We have those, and the sort of the capital friendly grant is a rare thing in our world, and we'd like to find more of them.
Chris, any thoughts from you?
Well, there's actually, just on that note, there's a specific tax credit that was just announced, the Ontario Made Manufacturing Tax Credit, in the recent budget. But I would just add to the point that Kirk made about capital is that program is specifically for Canadian-controlled private corporations. And one of the first things I had happen when it was announced, it's for manufacturing, so it's really for the processing side of things. But is that it would be great to have that expanded to other categories of business, because a lot of businesses are not necessarily CCPC. So that's one. But that's a pretty large program that's out there right now in Ontario. That's a source of capital that's there.
That's super helpful. We're unfortunately running short on time. I want to take these last couple of seconds to thank everyone. Chris, Craig, Catherine, Kirk, all of you have been very surprisingly all C and K. That's interesting as well. Just noticed that. Thank you very much for your time. Honestly, I think this conversation has been super insightful. And if I'm maybe speaking out of turn here, but if anyone in our audience would like to connect with any of our panelists, I know all four of them are available on LinkedIn. Hopefully that's okay with the four of you. They can reach out to you and connect there.
Thank you very much for this, Simar. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.